It's Tuesday, December 23rd, 2025. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Granthermes. Today on the show, the Epstein files have been released, except not really, and not all of them, and the law enforcement in charge of releasing the files is admitting to openly breaking the law and then promises to continue to do so. Now, is it unexpected? No. Is the way they're doing it still something that should shock you? 100%. So today I'm going to break down what's in these files, what's supposed to be in these files, what isn't in the files, and what might happen next, because the cover-up here looks like it's going to be worse for the administration than they thought. But first, make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, leave a comment or a review, and be sure to hit that like button if you're a watcher on YouTube. Subscribe to the Make It Make Sense Substack for just $5 a month right now, or during our subscription drive, you can get an annual subscription for 20% off the monthly price. And for the Making the Most founding members, you get your price locked in for life. Subscribers not only get access to the podcast, but the weekly original reporting, the weekly Make It Make Sense wrap-up newsletter, Too Long Tuned Out, and the Things You Forgot from Civics class newsletter, a breakdown of the basic civics lessons we either never learned, didn't care about when we learned them, or might be a little embarrassed to say that we forgot. This week's was all about what the role of the president was meant to be. And spoiler, it wasn't about getting the DOJ to break the law to protect you. So the subscription drive is only running until the end of the year. You don't have a lot of time left. Head to the links in the show notes to subscribe today. Give the gift of luxury this holiday season with Cozy Earth. Picture it. A quiet holiday morning, everyone together wrapped in warmth, laughter, and that perfect kind of cozy that you just wish you could bottle all the time. Well, a silent night starts with the right sheets. And Cozy Earth's bamboo sheets are the ultimate gift. It's everyday luxury elevated, the kind of comfort that turns every night into a serene escape no matter how much clatter arises. Plus, every sheet has a 100-day sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. You really cannot go wrong. And don't forget about the pajamas for those holiday mornings. The women's stretch knit and the men's bamboo sets are made for those slow, snuggly holiday moments at home. Visit CozyEarth.com and use my exclusive 40% off code MIMS25, that's MIMS25, to get 40% off your entire order this holiday season. And if you get a post-purchase survey, make sure you heard about Cozy Earth from Make It Make Sense. We get a cut of that money, so you're helping us, and you get to stay warm this holiday season. Wrap the ones you love in luxury with Cozy Earth. All right, let's get back to the show. Last week, Friday, was the deadline for the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files, and the DOJ just blatantly ignored that law. There's no real other way to say it. The Epstein Transparency Act, which was passed by Congress and signed into law by the president, requires that all of the DOJ's Epstein documents be released. All of them, with as few redactions as possible, while protecting victim identities, and not protecting other people out of embarrassment or political fallout. Instead, the Department of Justice decided to only release some of the files by the deadline, again in clear violation of the law. Now, the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, who has been taking point on this, has said a few different things. First, that they were taking painstaking efforts to protect victims, a lie we'll get to in a minute, and then that there were just so many files that they couldn't have been properly redacted in the 30-day window set out by the law. Now, that seems to be a product of the fact that the FBI and DOJ have hollowed themselves out and reassigned tens of thousands of agents and employees and lawyers to immigration raids and cases. But the thing here is that the Trump administration has been promising to release these files since the beginning. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, announced in February she had the files on her desk. Then they handed out binders of Phase 1 of the files to right-wing influencers, to we'll release them, but they're a hoax and don't exist, to now there are actually so many files we can't get to them all. None of that seems to square together, right? But that's also not how the law works. You don't get to just ignore it because the lift is too heavy. The deadline is the deadline. And we'll come back to possible consequences about this in a second. It's also worth pointing out here that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, has been absent from the news when it comes to this latest release, likely because she's the reason the White House and Donald Trump are fighting this fight in the first place, because she was the one who kickstarted this fight over the files back in February. Like I said, when she said that she had them on her desk, and then has, in Trump's view, bungled this thing every step of the way. Now, like I said in an episode a few weeks ago, I would not be surprised if Bondi is fired or asked to resign in 2026, and then someone like Todd Blanche takes over. So, before we talk about what's in the files, let's talk about what's not. Journalists like myself are still combing through these tens of thousands of pages, but a few things stuck out right away. First, it was the fact that more than 500 of the initial 3,900 pages were entirely blacked out, like the pages were nothing but a giant black rectangle. Again, remember that the only things that were supposed to be blacked out were information that could identify victims. So again, another clear violation of the law here. There's just no way, according to transparency experts, that entire pages would be victim identification information. Likely, what's happening there is they're covering for government employees whose names don't fall under the protections of this law. And then we got pretty clear evidence that the DOJ was actively protecting Trump. First, it was a photo of a bunch of photos on a desk, one of which included photos of Trump with a group of women, along with other photos of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell meeting the Pope, and another one was of Bill Clinton. That and about a dozen other photos were suddenly taken down. All of them included President Trump. The photos were taken down after people pointed them out that Trump was in them and he was surrounded by these women, and then they were only put back up after different outlets reported that those images had been removed. Here's what Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, had to say about that on NBC over the weekend.
Well, you can see in that photo, there's photographs of women. And so we learned after releasing that photograph that there were concerns about those women and the fact that we had put that photo up. So we pulled that photo down. It has nothing to do with President Trump. There are dozens of photos of President Trump already released to the public, seeing him with Mr. Epstein. He has said that in the 90s and early 2000s, he socialized with him. So the absurdity of us pulling down a photo, a single photo, because President Trump was in it, is laughable. And the fact that everybody's trying to act like that's the case is a reflection of their true motivation. But the reality is anybody, any victim, any victim's lawyers, any victim rights group can reach out to us and say, hey, Department of Justice, there's a document, there's a photo, there's something within the Epstein files that identifies me, and we will then, of course, pull that off and investigate it.
So, that's a lie. We know that for a few reasons. First, the Department of Justice went out of its way last week to release a bunch of incriminating photos of Bill Clinton from the files without a lot of regard for potential victims. And on top of it, a victim came forward this weekend as a Jane Doe and told the DOJ that she'd found her identifying information in the files. She's asked that it be redacted, and has also asked for her own FBI file given to her that she's a part of the Epstein investigation. So far, the DOJ has refused to answer her. So when the Deputy Attorney General says the DOJ is responding to victims, they're not. And then we get to the other redactions here. Again, these are meant to protect the victims. Not just the hundreds of pages of black ink, but in the rest of the files. There are a lot of redactions. But it's not just the black bars. It's the actual search function in these pages themselves. Because when you go through them and you search for the name Trump, in a lot of these pages, it doesn't work. But if you search something like Trump space, it does. And it brings up where the president is mentioned. And if you put in names like, let's say, Clinton, it does come up right away with Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton without having to try and trick the system, which is a form of sort of shadow redaction here. And before I go on, I know that I've said Clinton's name a few times. I'm going to come back to him a little bit. Don't worry. So you've got the photos, the broken search function, and then you get court documents that have names redacted. And if you search the actual court filings in the overall government databases, not just the DOJ release, you can very easily see many of the redactions are for Trump's name, including one where an adult trafficking victim detailed how Trump allegedly abused another one of Epstein's victims. And I'm not going to read that. It's gross. And then we get an internal email from 2020, and unnamed U.S. attorney and an unspecified DOJ official are talking to each other, whose names we should absolutely know, but they're blacked out. They flagged Trump's name as a passenger aboard Epstein's plane in 1993 while they were flying with an alleged victim, or, actively involved in trafficking. But then we got two separate tweets today from the DOJ that essentially say the Department of Justice is working on behalf of the president, not the law. The first one came this morning. It was about a series of documents that were allegedly sent to the DOJ in 2020. The official department account saying some of these documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims made against President Trump that were submitted to the FBI right before the 2020 election. To be clear, the claims are unfounded and false, and if they had a shred of credibility, they certainly would have been weaponized against President Trump already. That's weird. The second came this afternoon, after images of an alleged letter from Jeffrey Epstein to the convicted sex offender and former Team USA Gymnastics and Michigan State Gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar, where Epstein allegedly wrote that President Trump shared an affinity or their affinity for nubile girls. Ew. I know. And the letter itself, I need to say here, does have some issues that don't make it really seem like it's real. But the DOJ normally wouldn't comment on something like that. Instead, it did and gave reasons online as to why it must be a fake. Now, neither of those official statements would come from an independent Department of Justice. They are evidence that the DOJ is working on behalf of Trump the man, not the United States or the rule of law. An independent DOJ wouldn't rush to Trump's defense and certainly wouldn't comment on an ongoing investigation into allegations that should have already been run down before the release of these files. So if that's the redaction stuff and the DOJ covering here, you're probably wondering what's actually in the files. And right now, that is kind of hard to know. There are tens of thousands of pages that need to be sifted through, but that doesn't mean there haven't been some really eyebrow-raising pieces of paper and some frankly smoking guns. First, there's been a lot on former President Bill Clinton, images of him with Epstein and young girls. Now, it's been known for a long time that Bill Clinton was close friends with Epstein and flew on his plane a number of times. Clinton has been made to be a sort of boogeyman in this first release by the White House, again, against the law, but they underestimate how low Clinton's approval rate is with Democrats overall. The thinking here is that they can try to take Clinton down and drag the Democrats down with them, or maybe Democrats would push to not have these things released. Well, Democrats don't like Bill Clinton as much as Republicans like Donald Trump. With Democrats, Clinton's approval rating is 77% as of January this year, which I know seems high in our current context right now, but for a president as popular as Clinton when he left office was, you'd expect that number to be in the high 80s or better. Obama's is 96%. Overall, among all voters, Clinton's approval rating is around 37%, according to polling from YouGov done around last month. Trump's is at 35%. Now, none of this means what's in the files isn't serious, and the Democrats and Americans don't need to grapple with those images of the former president because they do need addressing. Clinton's spokesperson, when these images were released, made a rare statement about the files, saying what the Department of Justice has released so far in the manner in which it did makes one thing clear. Someone or something is being protected. We do not know whom, what, or why, but we do know this. We need no such protection. So that's basically Clinton's people saying, release more files. There have also been a lot of things with Trump's name on them. Many of the things we already knew about, but one that stuck out to me today was a letter from an FBI investigation with the date of October 2020, which might be what the Department of Justice was talking about this morning in those pre-election documents. But in this letter, an alleged victim recounts being invited to a party at Jeffrey Epstein's house in Florida, where Trump visited frequently. And then Trump invited that victim to a party at Mar-a-Lago, and the victim was told not to go because it was a party for prostitutes, alleging that Donald Trump ran a prostitution ring out of his resort in the 2000s about the same time he was the closest with Jeffrey Epstein. Make of that what you will, and there will certainly be more things like it to come. The final thing that's been on display here is just how either incompetent or not focused the FBI and DOJ have been when it comes to the Epstein files, and maybe focused on something else, because there were many instances of being able to unredact redacted files on your phone, because many of the files appear to have been redacted by using Adobe Acrobat, the Office software, and then just upload it, meaning you can copy and paste redacted portions of some of these files into your Notes app and see what's redacted. Again, not exactly protecting victims here. The DOJ also included in these files an AI-generated video of Epstein's death from inside the jail cell that was posted to YouTube 5 years ago, where the original poster, whose account is filled with anti-Semitic and conspiracy videos, said, quote, "I am not great with this stuff as far as rendering 3D graphics," and then admitted to using AI to help generate some of the video, which at the time was really rudimentary, but was still available. And then there was the evidence that FBI Director Kash Patel lied to the Senate this year when he said there was no evidence in any of the files that Epstein trafficked women or children to other people. In fact, here's him saying it.
Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself?
Himself. There is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And the information we have, again, is limited.
So the answer is no one?
For the information that we have.
In the files?
In the case file.
Turns out that wasn't true. An email in the files from 2019 found at least 10 trafficking co-conspirators from around the country. So in the end, what we get here is a DOJ and an FBI that are actively breaking the law to cover for a president while also putting victims at risk through incompetence, and then lying about it on top of it. And the big question here is what happens next? Well, first of all, Congress and the Senate are on holiday break right now, but there are already calls for the Attorney General to be impeached or held in contempt of Congress, which is a legitimate charge that carries something like the force of law. Here's how the authors of the law to release the files put it this weekend on CBS.
Todd Blanche is the face of this, but it's really the Attorney General's office, Pam Bondi, who is responsible. And there are several ways to get at this. Some take longer, some are shorter. The quickest way, and I think most expeditious way to get justice for these victims is to bring inherent contempt against Pam Bondi. And that doesn't require going through the courts. And give her, and basically Rokan and I are talking about and drafting that right now.
Okay.
No, we only need the House for inherent contempt, and we're building a bipartisan coalition, and it would fine Pam Bondi for every day that she's not releasing these documents. And what the American people want to know is, who are these people? And instead of holding them accountable, Pam Bondi is breaking the law. And this is the corrupt system, the Epstein class that people are sick of. So I believe we're going to get bipartisan support in holding her accountable, and a committee of Congress should determine whether these redactions are justified or not.
Those are serious charges, and if a fine is put into place, it could add up quickly for Bondi, who doesn't have a guarantee that Trump would have her back, given how little we've seen of her lately. And then there are calls to force some kind of legal action against the DOJ and the administration from the Senate. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer announced he'd be advocating for a resolution when officials get back from holiday break. Now, I know a resolution doesn't sound like much, but it all kind of adds up and adds to the growing frustration among voters and members of Congress and the Senate on both sides of the aisle over the release of the files. And all of this means that no matter what the DOJ does or doesn't do, no matter how much the White House pushes back, the Epstein files, the one scandal the president has not been able to shake in 2025, will still be there in 2026. All right. That's it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications if you're a watcher on YouTube. Subscribe to the Make It Make Sense Substack, where you can still get that annual subscription price for 20% off right now during the subscription drive for the end of the year. And speaking of the end of the year, this is my last episode just for this week. I'm going to take a little bit of a holiday break myself, but I won't be entirely out of your feeds. I've got something fun coming for you tomorrow night, so be on the lookout for that in your feeds. Otherwise, share the show on social media. It's MIMS News Pod. That's MIMS News Pod, all one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Grant_Hermes on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Granthermes, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.